that her story lives on in each and every one of you.
The light of this candle heals our grief.
People who are suffering from this disease were exposed while serving our country.
Let me ask Ellen to come up and be the MC. I love you the most.
All right, Linda asked me to be the MC. I think this is going to be a pretty easy part of my day. Before I invite up our keynote speaker, I just want to say a huge, can you hear me? A huge thank you to everyone. I've been a volunteer for the past 4 years for this conference. I've watched it grow. I've watched this community become more and more international, and I look forward to the growth and prosperity of this community. So continue to fight the fight. And having said that, I would now like to invite our keynote speaker.
I have to begin by doing a little confession. I'm Catholic, and so confession is something we learn at an early age. Thank you, Marilyn. Actually, I've got a prepared message, and I'm not going to tear it up yet. I may just totally ignore it. But little kids who go through the confession experience spend most of the time prior to actually going into the confessional trying to figure out what they've done wrong. And in some cases, will exaggerate a little bit. And I have a dear friend, Jean Ann, who recently told me the story about how when she was probably about in 4th or 5th grade, she was in a religious education class, and the nun was talking about all these terrible sins, and the nun made reference to adultery, which 4th and 5th graders, back then wouldn't understand. Unfortunately, maybe today they would, certainly with reality TV. But Jean Ann asked the nun for an explanation, and the nun kind of gave a bizarre explanation. It didn't really clarify it. And so Jean Ann went to confession the next week and was a little puzzled as to what to say. And when she got in the little confessional and the little door slid open and she started talking to the priest, she rattled off her list and included adultery. And the poor priest was just shocked and had to have an explanation. So I'm not going to confess anything like that this morning, but I am going to confess that I've made poor Linda's life a nightmare with my procrastination and inability to get my act together for this morning. I was supposed to have PowerPoint, and I just couldn't get my head wrapped around a PowerPoint. And frankly, I think this message has changed about 4 times in the last 4 days. So the PowerPoint would have given you just a massive headache and maybe even made some of you nauseous. Just a little bit of background about me. You know that I'm Irish and you know that I'm Catholic now, but I'm a former elementary school teacher. And with that comes, well, there's a saying, once a teacher, always a teacher. So a little bit of it's probably going to come out this morning. If I start calling you class or I start telling you to line up to use the bathroom, just totally ignore me because you'll know that I'm channeling way back. I've been out of the classroom 32 years. During those 32 years, I worked as a union representative for teachers in Minnesota. And 4.5 years ago, I thought I was retiring. I submitted a letter, went through all the paperwork to retire, and about 2 weeks after my retirement, I got a call from the priest at my church. And I didn't know him very well. I knew his colleagues pretty well, but I didn't know Father O'Gara very well, and he said he wanted to meet me for breakfast. And I thought there was going to be some sort of an intervention. I thought maybe he had found out what I was up to politically or something. So we went to breakfast, and I was a wreck. I didn't sleep the night before, and during the course of breakfast, he started telling me about how he wanted to create an outreach position at church and asked me if I would do it. And I was so shocked, I quick said yes before he could change his mind. So since then, I've been a church lady, part-time, and I've managed not to get myself fired from it yet. So I've also been known to swear like a sailor, so it's kind of an odd combination. But anyway, I apologize to the sailors. So, good morning. This has been an amazing weekend. It's just been just amazing. I've loved every minute of it, and thank you. Like I I've reconnected with some dear friends like Heather and Cameron and Linda and Jordan and Doug and Emily and Jill. I mean, so many people that I knew before, but now I'm going away with so many new friends. I kind of feel like I'm back in the days of when I had a pen pal, so this is great. So, Linda, thank you for the invitation to be here this morning. Jordan, thank you for the wonderful recognition of Bruce last night. The only thing that would have made it better is if he could have been here to get the award himself. And thank you all for listening to me this morning. I'm really happy to be here. If you haven't figured this out, I speak at 400 words per minute with Gust 800. Although I haven't had any caffeine yet this morning, I'm still suffering the after effects of that rich chocolate cake, which had a lot of caffeine in it. And I may break some records. I'm an abstract random, and during my almost 61 years, I've pretty much succeeded in surviving in a concrete sequential world. What I'd like to talk about today is the power of your story and how your story can influence others. The title in the brochure is a call to action, and a call to action is kind of a daunting sounding title. It kind of would leave me a little nervous if I were on the receiving end as you are. So just to lighten it up a little bit, I'm going to change the title and call it Tell Your Story. Storytelling is a rich part of our lives. It's a part of our culture and our history. It influences us in a great way. Storytelling is instructive, it's entertaining, and for many it's a great source of motivation. I'd like you to stop for a moment and think about the favorite stories you've enjoyed throughout your life. Think about the stories from your childhood, family stories passed from generation to generation. Believe me, we've got some doozies in my family. Stories about loved ones, stories about yourself. As an elementary ed major, Children's Lit was my favorite course, and it wasn't just because the books were lighter to carry and easier to plow through than the typical college text. I love that course because it took me back to my childhood and it let me enjoy those favorite stories from when I was a kid, but it also let me discover some new ones. And I was so excited about the opportunity to share those stories one day in my own classroom. Following college graduation, I went on to teach first graders and third graders in a wonderful public school in western Minnesota. During my 4 years teaching third graders, my teaching colleague Connie and I would spend the 15-20 minutes following the lunch and playground break that the kids had each day around noon. And that became our favorite time of day because we would take those few minutes and to calm them down from the running around on the playground, we'd read to them from chapter books, books like Charlotte's Web. The kids loved it when we'd read Charlotte's Web to them because it was always, okay, now, how soon are they going to cry? You know, they'd wait for us to cry. They loved it. They also liked the book, How to Eat Fried Worms. It was back about 7 or 8 years ago. It was done in a movie version, a lousy movie, great book. But they loved that because we'd go into these characters and we'd get exaggerated and crazy. So it was delightful. To this day, I run into former students, and frequently they'll mention the books we read and the impact those stories have made on their lives. Every one of you has a powerful and important story to share. You've been sharing them here this weekend. Cameron, Sandy, Damani, Ellen, you've been sharing those stories here this weekend. The doctors, the researchers, the attorneys, the advocates. You've been sharing them here this weekend. We need to share them with total strangers, and that's what I want to talk about now. Because your stories not only help and inform us, your family, your friends, the folks you know, but they also help and they inform and they energize coworkers, casual acquaintances, and total strangers who know little or nothing about asbestos and the really real risk it poses in our lives. Your stories can help shape public policy in this city and back home in our state capitals. Your stories can compel elected officials, both federal and state decision makers, to make the right decisions and to take the right votes. Votes that reflect the American values of common, everyday, working American families. Not the fat cats, but the common, everyday Americans who pay their taxes, who go to work, who expect to be treated fairly, not only by their employers, but also by their government. Your stories help, and actually they do more than help. They propel the work of organizations like ADAO, the Environmental Working Group, MARF, WHO, the American Association for Justice, and the law firms. And I want to just stop and say something about law firms. You know, prior to Bruce's diagnosis with mesothelioma, I didn't know how to say that word, I didn't know how to spell that word, I didn't know what it meant, but I also didn't know very much about trial lawyers. I did know what it was like, though, to work for a union and to walk around with the stigma that unions and union reps have. And so it gave me a bit of a taste of what it must be like to be a trial lawyer, because we put a label on that, like they're bad people, that they're chasing ambulances. It's anything but with the trial lawyers that I've met in my experience. And so I want to do a little shout out to the folks who help make sure that we have an opportunity to seek justice in this country when we've been wronged. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. About 12 years ago, I met two guys by the name of John Simmons and Jeff Cooper when I was invited to be a part of the lobbying effort to defeat the FAIR Act. And we succeeded at that. And it was quite an experience. It was daunting in many ways, not the least of which was the day that we were all standing around in a conference room after a meeting, and somehow the question of, where were you when President Kennedy was shot, came up. I was the only one in the room who had an answer, because none of the rest of the people in the room were born at the time that Kennedy was shot. I left the room, so anyway. Despite that, I still like the Simmons Law Firm. Hopefully they're hiring some elderly people. But I will tell you that in Bruce's case, our attorney was just a magnanimous man, and to this day I consider him one of my dearest friends. I've had the privilege of testifying with him in our state legislative committees on issues related to asbestos, and I'm grateful to him. As Linda has said repeatedly through the conference, they are so selfless in so many ways, and I just wanted to do a shout out to them. But what's really important is organizations, lawyers, law firms, lobbyists need our individual stories as well. Linda and I have both gone to the Hill a lot. Doug's gone to the Hill a lot. Many of you have gone to the Hill numerous times. Jill, Heather, Ellen, Sandy, you've been there, and it's a great experience, but you know that it's not the statistics, it's not the nuances of the legislation and the legalese that make a difference. It's our individual stories. It's important to those organizations that we tell our stories and that we help correct the fairy tales that are flying around about asbestos, asbestos-related diseases, and the legal issues. We're in the midst of a slow, steady, and all too successful nationwide effort to pass legislation here in DC and in each state that will bit by bit, like the drip of a leaking faucet, erode and seriously impair rights of those who have been diagnosed with mesothelioma, asbestosis, and asbestos-caused cancers. The American Legislative Exchange Council, commonly referred to as ALEC, has model language sample bills per se, on a whole host of issues, including asbestos issues and asbestos litigation. The bills look innocuous enough, but they are not. They are anything but. Along with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, they've come up with clever names for their proposals, names like the FACT Act. And those sound innocent enough, don't they? If the FACT Act is innocent, I'm a size 2, and I can assure you that I'm not a size 2. The legislators who wrote and who will vote for these bills pontificate that they are doing this for families and patients. And yet they have never provided an opportunity for patients and families to testify about these bills because they know what we would say. In the case of the U.S. House of Representatives, they've gone out of their way to make sure that our testimony never happens. 2 years ago, when the legislation was first introduced, a conscientious, decent subcommittee chair who had worked with and remembered Bruce fondly decided that the three of us who had appealed to him to be heard should get an opportunity to testify. That testimony never occurred. His colleagues and staff, his Republican colleagues and staff, were furious as were the pro-FACT Act lobbyists. The bill was pulled from the subcommittee and advanced to the full committee without markup, which is very rare. As a concession, the three of us were offered an opportunity to meet with the committee in a closed-door, off-the-record private session, and we firmly declined, saying no, we had nothing to hide, and that we wanted our stories and our testimony to be treated just as anyone else's would be. There was no reason for a closed-door session. Be assured that although we did not testify that day, we have been telling our stories, and actually what they did has added a little more drama to the story. While advocacy organizations have wise, skilled, and articulate lobbyists in the fight, they're relying on us to tell our stories. They want us to tell our stories because it's our stories that change the conversation and have the potential to stop the bad legislation and pass the good legislation. We don't need hearing rooms here in Washington or in our state capitals to tell our stories. We can tell our stories in a number of powerful and important venues, and I want to go through just a few. First, you can tell your stories to local news organizations. You would be surprised how many reporters are jumping for the chance to get the kind of story you can tell. They love it. And as you tell your story, tell them about the FACT Act. That will draw the attention of your U.S. representative and your U.S. senator's offices when you start talking about federal legislation. Talk about the impact that it would have on you and your family and on others. You could also talk at your local churches, synagogues, and temples. They too look for speakers. Many church and synagogue temple organizations have committees and social justice groups that want to be a part of the public conversation. Civic organizations such as the League of Women Voters, the Kiwanis, the Elks, the VFW, the American Legion, and their auxiliary organizations would love to have you speak. And I can't think of a better partner than the VFW and the American Legion, given that so many people who are suffering from this disease were exposed while serving our country in the military. When you go to talk to these folks, go with a request. Ask them to speak up and oppose the FACT Act. Ask them to speak up and help us resolve the issues related to TSCA. Political party organizations, you may think, oh, Sue, you've not seen the political parties in my state. Are you crazy? Yeah, I am a little bit crazy, but I'm going to ask you to do it anyway. These organizations are where candidates are picked and where policy positions by parties are shaped. And if you can get in at the grassroots level, you can help those parties take positions that really represent what we're talking about here today. You can help them find candidates who reflect what we're talking about here today. And whether it's the Tea Party, the Green Party, the Independents, the Democrats, the Republicans, whoever it is, think about how you can kind of work your way into those organizations and share your story. And then there's the work venue. A number of years ago, before I retired from Education Minnesota, I had an opportunity to do a presentation about asbestos and mesothelioma with my colleagues. They were blown away. They knew the story. There was a lot of news coverage when Bruce was diagnosed. And since Bruce's death, we've had a number of other stories, particularly relating with iron miners in northeastern Minnesota who have a higher than average incidency of mesothelioma. But when I got up that day and was presenting, they were blown away by the statistics. You also may have local unions that would welcome your story as well. Those unions themselves may not have an individual within the union who has been diagnosed with the disease, but they may have a very deep concern about the disease, so you can help them in a great way. For many of us, mesothelioma has been quite a journey. We've learned a lot. We can still remember that doctor's room or that examination room when we first heard the term. Many of us were oblivious to the very real risks of asbestos prior to the start of this journey, but we've learned a lot, and we've learned it quickly. Our stories can be a source of support for others dealing with the diseases. Our stories can be a source of new thinking and new direction for those who represent us in Washington and our state capitals. Years ago, I became an avid listener of a wonderful national public radio program called The Story with Dick Gordon. Dick Gordon was a journalist based in North Carolina. And in Minnesota, his fans there would listen to him at 9 o'clock at night. He'd be on from 9 to 10. And each night, he would have a guest on, and for the whole hour, Dick Gordon and the guest would tell the story. Dick was an amazing listener and an amazing prober. He's no longer airing this show. I don't know where he is. I can tell you that I miss his program desperately. And one of the regrets I have is that I never made an effort to get him connected to the asbestos story. I really have to tell you that as he was going off the air, it kind of, I think that was a little bit of part of my grief with losing him. But I will tell you that this is what I've learned from Dick Gordon and his guests, and frankly, this is what I've learned this weekend here too. So as a little recap, as you tell your story, regardless of whether you're telling it to an elected official, to a VFW, to a League of Women Voters, to a friend, to a total stranger, measure yourself. Don't let yourself become a fire hose. On Friday, on my way out here, I was sitting next to an executive from a major organization in Minnesota, and we got visiting, and she asked me why I was coming out. I asked her why she was coming out, and I explained to her that I was coming to this conference and that I was going to be here to talk with people about asbestos and mesothelioma. She wanted to know a little bit about my story, and I had to really kind of rein myself in because my inclination was to tell her everything. And I was going to leave her dazed if I did that. So I turned off the fire hose, and I really tried to just narrow in to the basic essence of Bruce's battle with mesothelioma and the impact that it's had. So work on a concise message that really focuses on that human impact and allow the listener to absorb it all. That way, the next time you continue the conversation, you can add on to the story. Practice telling it. Damani was telling me last night about how she practiced telling her story. Practice telling it to the bathroom mirror, practice telling it to the steering wheel as you're sitting in your commute in the morning or going through the car wash. Practice it with your friends and family in a little dress rehearsal. If it feels too lengthy, then it probably is. If it feels too preachy, it probably is. If it feels too overwhelming, it probably is. So edit it. I love Earl's pictures, and I want to strongly recommend that you take your pictures with you when you have those kinds of conversations. I carry an envelope with me all the time of pictures of Bruce. And they're pictures of him when he was at his healthiest, and they're pictures of him when he was very frail and ill. Those pictures tell a story many times far better than my words can. Always ask the listener or listeners if they've got comments or questions, if they've got a story to share. Recently, I was meeting with staff in Senator Amy Klobuchar's office. All three of the staff had asbestos-related stories to tell. All three of the staff. It was amazing. I did far less talking there than I've done in any office here in Washington. It was great. If you're speaking with an elected official or their staff, be sure to specifically ask for their support. Sometimes we get so busy with our story that we forget to ask them to take the position that we're there lobbying. And remember that if you're meeting with staff, you're meeting with important people. Those staff members are trusted advisors to their bosses. And I will tell you that, frankly, many times I'd prefer to meet with the staff than with the elected official. The staff many times have more background information about the legislation. They many times have much more time and aren't in a hurry to get on to another meeting. And so they'll really take quality time with you. And many times they're more open about where their boss is coming from on the issue and will be very candid with you. So don't ever feel as though you've been treated any differently if you're meeting with staff. Always say thank you, and I can't tell you this enough. The number of elected officials that I've met over the years, both from when I was doing my work as a teacher advocate, but also in my seeing up close and personal what Bruce's life was like as a public official, the gratitude isn't always expressed, and in particular for the good guys. There are a lot of good people here in Washington, and actually right now there are a number of them who are not running again. Barbara Boxer, Harry Reid, and others. They deserve gratitude from the bottom of our hearts because they have stuck their necks out time and time again, and a big part of advocacy is saying thank you. So please, please, please be sure to thank them. You don't have to fly to DC to make a difference here. Your senators and your U.S. representative each have offices back home. Those are great places to meet with them. More and more, their schedules are becoming kind of goofy and they're spending more and more time back home. In particular, the House is. So this is a great opportunity for you to have those meetings back home, if not with the elected official, with their staffs back in the states. It's a great venue for you to have that conversation. Next week, we had anticipated that the U.S. House Judiciary Committee was going to mark up and pass out, not drinking pass out, but aye and nay pass out, the FACT Act. Just found out that they're not. The bill is not going to be marked up on Wednesday morning. That's good news. It gives us more time to spread the word. Reality is that that bill is going to pass out of that committee. But the longer it takes, frankly, the better, because it gives us more time to tell our stories. And one of the things that's really important is for us to make sure that those folks who are in the fight with us, helping us to beat the bill, have stories to tell when this vote goes to the floor of the House for passage. And we don't know when that will be. It could be this spring, it could be late this summer, it could be next fall. The FACT Act is an affront to the Bill of Rights and the U.S. Constitution. It's an insult to every one of us here in this room. It is an insult to anyone who will ever have to deal with asbestos disease. And this is legislation that, if it becomes public policy, will do anything but help patients and their families. Instead, it will become a deterrent in their efforts to secure justice. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you've done to advance our agenda. And I want to ask for a couple of volunteers. So Ellen and Heather and Jill and Marilyn, if you'd come up. And if you'd give each table a bag. Don't clap yet. Don't clap. You may read things. The elementary teacher's coming up. Each table's going to get a bag. And when your table gets the bag, I'd like you to pass it around and each help yourself. Each of you are spreading hope just as a master gardener plants bulbs and seedlings and scattered seeds in the spring of the year. I would like you each to take a seed packet from the bag as a reminder of the power of your story that you spread each time you tell it. Now, I will forewarn you that these seeds come from Minnesota, so they're kind of intended for Minnesota climate. So you may want to, if you're in California or Arizona, you may want to put them on your windowsill. When you plant the seeds, and I hope you do, I want you to think about the weight of the earth. I'm going to wait until everybody's got their seeds. I want you to think about the weight of the earth on those tiny little seeds. The weight of the earth on those tiny little seeds is not unlike the weight that we have felt in this battle with asbestos, in this effort to try and ban asbestos, to increase awareness, to find cures. It's not unlike the weight that so many have felt in hearing the diagnosis or saying goodbye to a loved one. And then I want you to think about the rain that nourishes the seeds, just as our tears have nourished us and healed our pain and washed away the agony. I want you to think about the sunshine, and I haven't been outside yet this morning. I hope there's some sunshine out there. But think about the sunshine that, along with the rain, has given life and new energy to those seeds, just as our family and friends and the wonderful people here in this room have given life and new energy to us. As the flowers begin to bloom later this spring, early this summer, I hope that you will be invigorated. I hope that you will spread hope. And I hope that you will tell your stories, because you and those stories make a powerful difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sue. That was awesome. At this time, and not on the agenda, I want to invite our breakfast, our brunch sponsor, Aaron, to come up and say a few words for Motley Rice. Thank you.
Good morning. Just very quickly, it's been an honor to meet each of you. You know, our attorneys, they go to the courtroom and they fight, or they're fighting the bankruptcy trust and making sure that we can get the funds that are needed. And, you know, as the director of communications, I don't always get to meet the clients. You know the stories and you know that what their struggles are. But this has been particularly special because now I know you all. It truly is a family. You know, Linda and I speak somewhat regularly, and she's tried to share how it is. And Ann Kearse, who couldn't be here, who is, you know, one of our leaders at the firm and fights tirelessly in West Virginia and Pennsylvania and South Carolina and Canada and everywhere, in not just asbestos, but occupational disease. They've tried to communicate to me what a unique opportunity this is. And it's just been a pleasure. And I look forward to staying in touch with so many of you and helping to tell your stories. You know, Ann has been fighting in West Virginia, in other places. We're closely involved with the American Association for Justice as well, and are involved in what they're doing and their advocacy efforts. So, you know, we are part of this fight. Thank you, Sue, for your comments about trial lawyers, because, you know, I like to joke that I accidentally went to work for a law firm. But, you know, our tagline, our mission statement is causes, not just cases. And as you saw from Nate Finch last night, I didn't expect it, but it is truly genuine. He goes in the courtroom and he works with our clients and fights for them. So we're just glad to help be part of telling those stories. So thank you again. Congratulations on what you're accomplishing, and I just encourage you to keep up the fight, and we look forward to being part of it. So thank you.